The NHL hit the free agency frenzy over the weekend, and Steele and I are here to break it all down for you on Monday's episode. The Carolina Hurricanes, Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Maple Leafs, and Nashville Predators all making moves. What does it mean for your fantasy squad? Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, hockey heads, and welcome back inside the lab. That is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you for joining us for Monday's edition, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Steele and I are still here for you Monday through Friday throughout the summer to break down the offseason moves. And this year's NHL free agent class, Steele, maybe lacked that big superstar name, but there was no shortage of moves made on July 1 and, of course, July 2. So we're going to break it all down on today's episode, and we'll start with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I talked about Carolina, Nashville Predators, Toronto Maple Leafs. This all obviously has impact, Steele, on these players' values.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with Pittsburgh? And there's going to be a lot more news for you and I to break down over the course of the week as moves continue to get made. So make sure you're tapped in. But I'll throw it over to you. What did you see from Kyle Dubas already making his impression on this Pittsburgh roster?
Yeah, we're going to try to get through all 32 teams in the next couple of weeks about what they've done to their team. But Kyle Dubas was very busy for Pittsburgh, making his statement already, like we're seeing from Daniel Briere in Philadelphia. Kyle Dubas, the new GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, making some big contract signings here. Lars Eller, 2 years, 4.9. Ryan Graves got a massive contract at 6 years, $27 million. They got Alex Nedeljkovic on a 1 year, $1.5 million contract. They re-upped Tristan Jarry for 5 years, Noel Acciari for 3, Matt Nieto for 2 years. So Kyle Dubas was very busy on Canada Day and just over the weekend. Very busy GM, and he knows what he's doing. I think there's a few players in here that we don't really need to talk about. Lars Eller, Alex Nedeljkovic, Matt Nieto, those guys, to me, don't really have any fantasy value going into next season. I think if you can get Alex Nedeljkovic whenever he is playing, pick him up if you can. Hopefully he can get a good game in for you. But Tristan Jarry is going to be the number one guy. He will get 50-plus games. So that's why I'm saying no value for Alex Nedeljkovic. On the other hand, of course, you've got Tristan Jarry. Ryan Graves could be a good option in the later rounds of your fantasy draft. I think he does bring some fantasy value. And same goes for Noel Acciari. He has minimum value for him, 244 hits, 81 blocks, 102 shots, 23 points. There is some fantasy value, but you can really just pick him to like the last 2 rounds of your fantasy draft, or don't draft him at all if you don't like him. But Tristan Jarry is the cherry right now. He's the cherry on top of everything that Kyle Dubas has done the last 2 days. 5 years, $26.88 million for him. And when you look at Tristan Jarry in the last 2 seasons, we all know he had a very down year. Still had a decent record, 24, 13, and 7 on last year's season, but he had a 290 goals against average and a 909 save percentage. That's the worst year he's had in his career so far. And I think we can see a bounce back season from Tristan Jarry. He's one of the top 10 fantasy goalies and goalies in the league, maybe just outside the top 10. It depends on who you're talking to. But when you look at where he finished in the fantasy season, this season that just finished, he finished 18th best amongst goalies. And the year prior to that, he was 8th best in fantasy league. So I think people might be a little wary on where to draft him. We've talked about this, me, and Michael Amato, about how, maybe waiting over the 3rd, 4th round to draft your first goalie. I think that's the position we're all going to be taking this year. Keep an eye on Tristan Jarry because I expect him to bounce back in a big way.
This is a goalie that's also finished top 10 in Vezina voting 2 out of the last 4 years. So, we know that he has that love from guys across the league. Injuries has also played a factor here for this goalie for me, Steele. His inability to really get that rhythm at times. He was banged up last year. He's been banged up a little bit in his career. But when he's healthy, he has really shone for me at times. And I drafted Tristan Jarry last year and was pretty happy about it. But then it just went off the rails a little bit. The moves overall from Dubas, you did a really good job of highlighting them. I don't need to break down those more minor ones. Ryan Graves secures the bag, though. That is a very fat contract for a player that, at the end of the day, this is his big payday, and I think it's a great move to shore up that defense for Pittsburgh. So I think that actually will help Tristan Jarry's cause next year. They just got a whole lot better defensively, in my opinion. I still think this team's going to struggle to score goals, so that might affect Tristan Jarry's win total. But everything else that Dubas did, I think, goes to really help the defensive side of this Pittsburgh team. So I'm really liking Tristan Jarry even more from the bounce back angle you're mentioning. So that's number one. And number two, I think Ryan Graves might be a decent little, maybe he's your last D-man off the board steal. Maybe he's, a nice little bench guy that you swap in for. He's not going to get you 40 or 50 points, but he might chip in with 30, 35, good plus minus numbers. He gets some decent shots on net. And I think what I like the most about him, Steele, is, he gets those blocks, he gets hits, and a little bit of PIM. So he really is a very balanced D-man that I think you could probably get. Yeah, like I'm saying, maybe second last round as a nice little bench spot.
Exactly. I think that's a perfect place to put him at. Again, like you said, he secured the bag. I think the contract itself, there could be a little bit of back and forth debate on what he probably should have got. But
a lot of
I don't think Kyle Dubas is done quite yet. I think, when I'm looking at the salary cap, they're actually over the salary cap by $1.5 million right now. So I think clearly Kyle Dubas is not done with some moves. I think with the Alex Nedeljkovic pickup, I think we could possibly see Casey DeSmith on his way out of Pittsburgh as well. I think Kyle Dubas, I think Casey DeSmith and Mikael Granlund will be the next two guys that were probably out of Pittsburgh to create some of that cap space and get some of it back. Maybe add another blue liner, another depth guy in the bottom six. But Kyle Dubas, one of the good GMs in the league right now, and he's making some moves. Also making some big moves. Let's get over to the Carolina Hurricanes before we move on to any other team. Big signings by the Carolina Hurricanes. And Michael Bunting, 3 years at $13.5 million. I didn't see him going to Carolina, so that was very surprising to me. Dimitry Orlov got the bag for the next 2 years. 2 years, $15.5 million. And then they re-up Frederik Andersen, Antti Ranta, and Jesper Fast. What are your thoughts on what Carolina did?
Well, Don Waddell, the GM in Carolina, continues to just get it done for this Carolina Hurricanes team. Most of these moves just are very sound hockey decisions all around, and that's what the Don Waddell MO has been since he's entered the GM chair in Carolina, and I think he's one of the big winners on the weekend for sure. Steele. Dimitry Orlov, say what you will about he's not exactly the flashiest guy out there, and he's not the biggest, but he is an effective defenseman. He can play on the top line. And I think in Carolina, with what they've done now, Steele, bringing back the two goalies as well, they have one of the nicest goaltending trios going. Now they have Kochetkov in the mix. I don't know if they're done either, Steele. I think getting Ranta under a good deal, there's going to be some teams interested. I want your take on that. But at the end of the day, I think Michael Bunting's value is something to really keep an eye on here because he's going to get a look with some really good Carolina players in that top six.
That's actually the one I'm a little bit wary about. I don't know how great he will fit into this Carolina Hurricanes scheme of things. I think he's going to be a great player for them. I just don't know point production-wise if it will be all there. I agree with you. This is probably the best tandem goalies, or all three of them when you throw in Kochetkov as well. I think this is great for them heading into the season because you think about it, even just halfway through the year or when they get to the next trade deadline, Antti Ranta could be on his way out, or even Frederik Andersen. It's proven now that you really don't need the top goaltender after what Hayden Hill just did for the Vegas Golden Knights. So they've got three goaltenders. I think by next trade deadline, we can see one of them, probably Ranta or Andersen, on their way out. Michael Bunting, though, 3 years, $13.5 million for the next 3 years for the Carolina Hurricanes. This is the guy that I think to be wary about. He started off very, very slow this past year in Toronto. He started to pick things up again towards the middle of the season. I'm going to pull up his stats real quick. 49 points in 82 games. He really started to pick it up after the first 2 months of the regular season, but I think from going to playing with, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, I don't know if his value will necessarily increase that much. I think he'll probably, for me personally, I think he'll stay around the same. Round 14, maybe round 15 is where you could probably get him at.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he has something to prove. And I think, the points you're making are totally accurate. And you got to be wary of what he was able to do with those really elite pieces. But I think he's going to get a good shot to play in that top 6 in Carolina. And I think the responsibly defensive and smart brand of hockey that they play under Rod Brindamore, I think he might have a chance to really learn how to get it done as an everyday NHLer and not run around there with a chicken with his head's cut off at times. Is that a big ask for a player that we've seen have his, decisions between the ears not always work out? Sure. So I'm here for that angle. I just think also, if he does figure it out, and I don't know, Steele, that chip on his shoulder, you know what I'm saying? Things didn't go right in Detroit and Toronto at the end.
He's great. He's great for banger leagues, 103 penalty minutes.
I'm keeping my eye on him. I think what you're saying goes in the same vein. Maybe be wary of taking him too early. I still think he holds some decent fantasy value here, along with some of the other guys we're going to talk later on today's episode. Nashville Predators, Ryan O'Reilly, some other pieces. The Toronto Maple Leafs, speaking of which, I don't know, Steele, this Bertuzzi edition salvaged the day a little bit. I don't know how things were looking so far for Treliving. You and I will talk about that. I'm excited for your takes for sure on that one. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $2,000. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-unders to who you think is going to hit the first dinger. And it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid out instantly, and there's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets back. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues, including the NCAA, your team every single day. And make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow. We appreciate all that love and support you show us every single day. Flip, you got anything left to say on the Carolina Hurricanes before we move forward and move on to the Nashville Predators?
I think the only other thing is I think this move that they bring in Dimitry Orlov on the back end, obviously Brett Pesce's name has been thrown out there a lot being on the move. I think you'll see him be on the move, and that's why I was saying I don't think Don Waddell is quite done yet. Maybe he packages a goalie. I don't know what's going to go on now, but I think Pesce is probably now on his way out, and I believe maybe even Brady Shea or Shy. I always mess that up as well, but him as well. I just think the Carolina Hurricanes, they solidified themselves as an Eastern Conference final threat, and they've made two straight Eastern Conference finals?
Yeah, they've been there.
Almost there. Almost there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that they have improved big time.
They have. And again, this is a home run for Don Waddell and what he's been able to do the last few days. Michael Bunting. And, I think the same can be said for Barry Trotz in his first year as GM of the Nashville Predators. I think he's done a phenomenal job so far. Signs Cody Glass 2 years, $5 million, brings in 3 veteran players to play with these young guys they've got in their bottom 6 group as well. Gustav Nyquist, 2 years, $6.37 million. Ryan O'Reilly, 4 years, $18 million. And Luke Schenn, 2 former Toronto Maple Leaf players, getting them at the trade deadline, now signing with the Nashville Predators. Luke Schenn, 3 years, $8.25 million. And right off the bat, I want to talk about Ryan O'Reilly because I think that's the biggest name, obviously, out of all 4 guys that Barry Trotz has been able to sign the last few days. And obviously for Ryan O'Reilly, it was a really rough start to the year with St. Louis last season. It was even a rougher end to the regular season because he got injured with the Maple Leafs. So he only had 30 points in 54 games. When you look at the timeline of November or from December to February, that's really where he got his game going. I think we can see a little bit more of a bounce back. And there is some fantasy value with Ryan O'Reilly. His ADP is 141.6. So we're talking about the middle of the 12th round right now. realistically, I think you can probably wait till round 15 or 16 to get him. Because I think people are going to be a little bit hesitant to draft him after a very down year, as well as he's going to be 33. He'll be 33 years old by the time the regular season starts. And I think people will let him slide a little bit, and that will be your benefit if you're able to get him.
Yeah, he'll be turning 33 in the middle of the season, it looks like. But anyway, you're spot on with it. And at the end of the day, for me with this situation, I'm just a little wary of Nashville's overall ability to score goals. I think they're going to still be a really good team. I think they're going to be better than we saw last year.
Yeah.
UC Saros is still an elite goaltender, in my opinion. The blue line is balanced. I like Luke Schenn's addition. They're a tough squad as well. I just think, Matt Duchene, was that the right move? I think so. They're trying to turn the page. It's Trotz's team. So I understand all the moves. I'm just a little wary if they're going to score a lot, Steele. I think they're going to be a good team. And I'm with you on Ryan O'Reilly's draft spot. I would just definitely not reach with him. The injuries are one thing, the age is another, but just the overall ability of this team to score is my only concern. But I still like the move. I think was it at 4.5 that they're paying him? I think it's a fair price. So, but at the end of the day, I think Trotz is making his mark felt on this squad. And aside from David Poyle setting him up so nicely with draft picks, young players, you and I have talked a little bit. I think we love the Parsonen kid. He looks pretty good. Cody Glass has made a couple of steps forward. Maybe a fully healthy Philip Forsberg. He's worth a look. So there's a lot of little interesting players on this Nashville Predators team that I think you have to be, thinking of the very back stages of the draft to be taking.
Yeah, I think so too. Even guys like Philip Tomasino and Thomas Novak, Kiefer Sherwood are guys who are, on the younger side of this roster and bringing in those veteran players to really mentor them in this situation. I like the addition of Luke Schenn. I'm going to be
me too.
No matter what next year. If I can get him in the last round, I'm going to wait as long as possible, but I'm going to get Schenn because the ability that and the aspect of the game that he brings everywhere that he goes. Schenn is the pure definition to me of growing in, like a fine wine. Like he developed over the stage of his career into what he is now. I love the physical ability of his, like always one of the top 3 hitters in the league every single season. So I love Luke Schenn on my fantasy hockey team. And if you can get him in the last round, that's an absolute steal in my opinion. Barry Trotz making some good moves so far. And he still has $8.8 million in cap space to work with. So I'm very excited about this Nashville team for next season.
And I'm with you on drafting Schenn. I think at the end of the day too, and I keep saying that, but it's what is your draft format? What is your league depth? Because in some leagues, you might not even need to draft Luke Schenn. You could definitely just grab him off the waiver wire in the first week or even the second week. It all happened. It all comes down to that format, Steele. But I think at the end of the day, there were clear winners and losers from the first 2 opening days of free agency. And I would say Carolina, definitely a winner. Nashville's on the list as a winner. And, I might even throw Pittsburgh in there for the Dubas side of things because I was really unsure there. But the Leafs, Steele, and we'll talk about that around the break. I don't know. I don't know if I'd count them as a winner, that's for sure. But let's talk about it right after this break.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to consider them a winner, but they made very minimal moves, but they got 2 decent players on the free agent market, and we're going to talk about them very, very soon. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Hammer that subscribe button, hammer the follow button. We appreciate all that love and support. Episodes Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning. We're going to get through all 32 teams. Free agent frenzy continues. There's going to be signings to come every single day. So we're going to get through all 32 teams in the NHL. Finishing this episode, though, Toronto Maple Leafs. It was very quiet for them to start with. The first signing that I heard of was Ryan Reeves for 3 years, $1 million. So Ryan Reeves is under contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Klingberg was the next player, 1 year, $4.5 million. And then most recently, I think it was in the last few hours of when we're recording this right now, Tyler Bertuzzi signs with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 1 year, $5.5 million. And I think that's my favorite out of all 3.
Yeah, well, it's got to be Tyler Bertuzzi. This is the first move from Treliving. Look, I actually understand the Ryan Reeves signing. I get
Yes,
it.
I do.
This
Yep.
team's been pushed around at times. Is it unfortunate that you have to ink him to a 3-year deal where he's going to be on this roster till I believe he's 40 years old, right? Like near 40. Like how old is Ryan Reeves already? Like I
He's
don't have it open.
36.
So there you go. He's going to be scraping 40 years old at the back end of this deal. He's already a defensive liability, and we know he can't skate very well. He's on this team to create a little bit of room and to make sure that there's some players out there looking over their shoulder when they mess with Matthews and Mitchie. I get the angle. I also get it from Treliving's side of things, right? Win friends and influence people. It's a good one. I saw lots of fans really excited about Ryan Reeves. Is there fantasy value? I don't think so. What does it mean for their overall success? I really don't know, Steele. But this Tyler Bertuzzi angle is something that we'll talk about in a sec. What do you think about Klingberg? Because obviously we know numbers have been down, defensive metrics are not sound. But when he is, he's been brought in. This is a gamble. There's a couple of gambles here by Treliving. And what do you think about this Klingberg one? Because I'm a little bit wary of it. They've got a lot of offense gone out the door in the last couple of days, Ryan O'Reilly and otherwise, Bunting and the other players we mentioned. And I don't know if what they've brought back in makes them a better team.
I actually love it. I love this signing from Brad Treliving with John Klingberg. 1-year deal. See what he can do at $4.5 million. I think that's a great price as well. Klingberg's been linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs the last few years. Obviously, the last season, he really put himself on a high market, thought that he could get a long-term deal and secure that bag. That wasn't the case. Not a lot of teams were after him. They didn't want to take that chance. He signs a 1-year, $7 million deal with Anaheim. And Anaheim was one of the worst teams last season. So when you look back to his prime days with the Dallas Stars, 67 points, 58 points, 45, 47. Obviously, it hasn't been trending in the right directions. It's been going up to down. I think from what he finished with last year, 33 points in 67 games between Anaheim and Minnesota. He had 9 points in 17 with Minnesota when he got traded at the deadline. I really like this. They needed a right shot defenseman. I'm looking at the roster, the line combinations right now. They needed a right shot defenseman who can sort of be that number 2 on the second power play unit. I'm really glad that Justin Hall is gone. That bozo needed to leave. I don't like him whatsoever. He needed to go, and I like John Klingberg a lot. So this might be a defenseman. You don't want to reach too far in the fantasy hockey draft, but this might be a defenseman that you might want to take a chance on, reach around just one round. You don't want to reach too much, but maybe a round or so. And I really like this signing from Brad Treliving.
Yeah, I want to like it, Steele. Trust me, I really do. And I hope we see, I guess it's a low risk, high reward potential here with the 1-year deal. These are gambles from him on Reeves and Klingberg. Can they pan out? For sure they can. Can they blow up in his face? Maybe just as equally. But the Bertuzzi signing,
yes,
this one is really the most exciting for sure. It's nice to see the Leafs also, obviously Klingberg, that's not his game, but Bertuzzi and Reeves are two very chippy players. They play with edge. Yeah, does Bertuzzi sometimes let that get away from him? For sure. But when he is on his game, it's a very nice balance of driving the opposition a little crazy, throwing his body around, and also scoring timely goals. He was amazing for the Boston Bruins after being dealt from the Detroit Red Wings. And I think maybe now that he gets to play with some very, elite offensive pieces, not like he didn't get to with the Detroit Red Wings at times up front as well. I am really excited to see Tyler Bertuzzi in the blue and white.
I'm very excited as well. And I think this is, again, when you go from Zach Hyman to Michael Bunting, and then from Michael Bunting to Tyler Bertuzzi, to me, Michael Bunting is the knockoff version of Tyler Bertuzzi. They have the same style of play. They can score goals. They can pass the puck. They're very physical and they're very chippy. They get under players' skins. Very similar styles of game, but Tyler Bertuzzi is the better player in my opinion over Michael Bunting. And again, just looking at the line combinations, I'm loving what I'm seeing. First line, Matthews, Marner, Bertuzzi. Second line, Tavares, Nylander, and Nyes. Third line, Lafferty, Camp, and Yarncroke. This is where it gets a little bit funny. Fourth line, Nicholas Robertson, Pontus Holmberg, and Ryan Reeves. Imagine Reeves playing with Robertson and Holmberg. That might be a little funny to see the fourth line get together, but I really like the look of this team. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with William Nylander. Will they be able to get a contract going? Will they be able to sign something, or is he going to be out of Toronto by the start of the regular season? That's still up in the air. But as of right now, I like the 3 signings from Brad Treliving, and I like the line combos.
I am not as sold on all the moves as you are. I appreciate your optimism, though. And I think at the end of the day, we've said this now about a couple of these teams. I really don't see the Leafs being actually even close to done because the main issues still lie. They need to get Matthews under contract.
Yep.
What do they do with the goaltending? Are they going to try and run it back with Matt Murray combination with Samsonov? I don't see that either. I think there's got to be more moves to come. I like the Camp signing. That made a lot of sense. He is a very valuable two-way forward. We're not talking fantasy here. I'm just talking about overall success of this Toronto Maple Leafs team. But I'm definitely going to be taking a look at Tyler Bertuzzi, and I just wanted to throw it back to you for one final question, and we'll be back for another jam-packed episode tomorrow on Tuesday. Tyler Bertuzzi, where are you drafting this guy? Because I think his value obviously has to go up. Can he stay healthy? He's been banged up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think his value goes up. If he plays with Austin, he's getting more points.
That's the big thing, though. It's been so hard for Tyler Bertuzzi to be in the lineup every single year. He always seems to play anywhere from 50 to 60 games. It seems like he's always injured at some point during the season.
Career high, only 73 games.
Yeah, and that was what, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
4 years ago.
That was 4 years ago. And the last 3 years haven't been super kind to him. He's gotten very fluky injuries. That's something to consider while you're drafting him. I was saying for Michael Bunting, you could probably get Bunting in the 14th, 15th. I think if Bertuzzi playing on the top line with Marner and Matthews, again, even with the injuries in consideration, you could probably get him in the 10th or 11th. If you can wait to the 12th, then probably there. But that would be
people are going to be reaching for him.
Right in the middle of that fantasy draft is where I would take Tyler Bertuzzi.
I think just because of I agree with you wholeheartedly. I wouldn't want to take him too high and then you get burned by an early injury. That's just a caveat with this player. But people are going to be reaching for him still because especially if he starts to get rushes on that top line through training camp and that trio, that's the Leafs' next big 3. People will be reaching to take Tyler Bertuzzi a little bit earlier in their drafts. Will it pan out? I don't know. I know we will be back, though, for another big-time episode tomorrow.
We will be back, of course, with we will get through all 32 teams eventually over the next few weeks. Again, signings coming out every single day, and we've only scratched the surface with what's happened so far. The offseason is among right now. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find all of our episodes out there. And thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.